It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but instead everything fell apart in a single breath. Alina stood in her wedding dress with her heart pounding inside her chest as her fiancé declared before the guests that he could not go through with it. He walked away, leaving her standing in humiliation and disbelief. The whispers around her were louder than thunder. She tried to breathe, but the veil felt like a net choking her. Her parents looked down ashamed, her friends avoided her eyes, and she felt the ground slipping beneath her feet. The world she had built around love shattered, and she wanted nothing more than to disappear. That night she walked the streets aimlessly, her makeup smudged, her shoes in her hands, and her soul heavy. The neon lights of shops flickered across her pale face as she questioned what she had done to deserve this. She had given years to a man who had thrown her away like nothing. Each step felt heavier until she stumbled into a narrow street where a small tea stall still glowed faintly. A young man sat there sipping his tea alone, his shirt old, his shoes worn, but his eyes warm. He looked at her not with pity but with a strange quiet curiosity. She stopped, unable to move forward. He tilted his head and asked softly, "Are you lost?" His voice was low but carried calmness. For reasons she could not explain, she sat down beside him. He ordered another cup for her without asking, and when she lifted it to her lips, the warmth melted a fraction of her pain. She did not know why, but she began talking. She told him about the humiliation, the broken engagement, the betrayal. He listened without interrupting. Not once did he look away or try to offer shallow comfort. When she finished, he simply said, "Sometimes what breaks you sets you free." His words lodged deep inside her. She asked his name and he said Ryan. She asked what he did and he smiled faintly and said, "I do what I can." She assumed he was poor from his appearance, and she was right in a way. Yet there was something about his calmness that pulled her closer. That night, instead of going home, she walked with him along the quiet streets. He talked about small things, the stars, the silence, the freedom of having nothing. For the first time since her world collapsed, she laughed. Days turned into weeks. She kept meeting him, sometimes by the tea stall, sometimes by the river. He never pushed her, never tried to impress her, never asked for more than her presence. People whispered when they saw her with him. Her family was horrified. How could a girl once about to marry into wealth now wander around with a man who had nothing? But Alina could not explain that with Ryan she felt alive again. She felt real. When he looked at her, he saw her, not her broken engagement, not her shame, not her failures. He saw her soul, and it terrified her and comforted her all at once. One evening, after weeks of quiet companionship, she told him that she did not care about the whispers anymore. She did not want to return to the world that had betrayed her. She wanted something real, even if it meant simplicity, even if it meant poverty. He looked at her for a long time, his eyes dark and unreadable. Then he asked her if she would marry him. She gasped at the suddenness. She thought of her parents, of society, of everything she was supposed to be. Then she thought of the empty eyes of her ex-fiancé walking away without guilt. She thought of the calm presence beside her, the man who never judged her, and she whispered yes. The next morning, with no grand ceremony, no guests, and no expectations, she married him quietly at a small local mosque with only 2 strangers as witnesses. She wore a simple white dress without jewels, and he wore a plain shirt. When she said the vows, her voice trembled, but her heart felt light. For the first time in months, she felt free. They moved into his small rented apartment. The walls were bare, the furniture old, but to her it felt like a palace of truth. She cooked their first meal from whatever was in the kitchen, rice and lentils, and he ate it as though it was a feast. They laughed at the dripping tap, they laughed at the creaking bed, they laughed at their own daring. Nights were filled with long talks, dreams shared under dim light, and a closeness she had never known with anyone. She did not care that he brought home little money from odd jobs. She worked 2 tutoring children. Together they made ends meet, but more importantly they made a life. People pitied her but she did not care. She had chosen love over pride and it gave her strength. Yet in the quiet corners of her mind a question often stirred. Who was he really? He spoke so little of his past. When she asked about his family he changed the topic. When she asked about his work he always said, "I do what I can." She accepted it, for love did not need reasons, but sometimes in the middle of the night when she caught him staring at the ceiling with eyes full of storms she wondered what secrets lay beneath his calm. She pushed the thought away, afraid that searching would break the fragile happiness they had built. But fate had other plans. One afternoon when she returned from tutoring she found him gone. On the table was a note in his handwriting, simple and steady: "Do not worry, I will return soon." She clutched the note, her heart racing. Hours turned to days and still he did not return. She searched everywhere, the tea stall, the river, the streets, but no sign. Panic consumed her. She realized how deeply he had become part of her existence, how his absence tore through her chest. Just when she thought she could not bear it any longer, he returned. His shirt was different, his shoes new, his eyes heavier. He hugged her tightly and whispered, "Forgive me." She asked where he had gone. He kissed her forehead and said, "Soon you will know." She wanted to press, but something in his tone silenced her. Life went on, but little hints began to appear. Once she saw him with men in suits who bowed slightly to him before walking away. Once she found bundles of cash hidden in a drawer. When she asked, he only smiled and told her to trust him. She did, because love demanded trust. But inside her chest a storm of questions grew. Was he in danger? Was he hiding from something? Or was he far more than what he appeared? She tried to push the thoughts aside until the night when truth began to break through. It was raining heavily. They were walking back home when a sleek black car stopped beside them. A man in an expensive suit stepped out and greeted Ryan with deference. He addressed him as Sir. Alina froze, her hand gripping his tightly. The man handed him a folder and said, "Everything is prepared for tomorrow." Ryan nodded calmly as though it was ordinary. Alina looked at him with wide questioning eyes, but he only whispered later. That night as thunder roared outside he finally spoke. He told her that there were things about him she did not know and that she would learn soon enough. She trembled, not sure if she was ready, but his arms around her steadied her. She realized that no matter what truth waited, she could not walk away. She had chosen him blindly once and she would choose him again, even in the dark. The following morning Alina awoke to silence and the scent of fresh roses on the table. Ryan was not beside her, but instead there was a note that asked her to dress simply and meet him outside at noon. Her hands shook as she read the words. Something inside her told her that this day would change everything. She chose a plain dress, tied her hair back, and stepped out with a heart that beat faster than it ever had. Outside she saw not the usual streets of their neighborhood, but a sleek black car waiting for her. The driver opened the door with a small bow. She hesitated but then entered, trusting the man she had married in the simplest of ways. The car took her through the city, past tall buildings and wealthy neighborhoods she had never entered before. Finally it stopped in front of a towering glass structure gleaming under the sunlight. Men in uniforms stood at the entrance and bowed as Ryan stepped out from another car that pulled in behind hers. He looked different. He wore a dark suit perfectly tailored, his posture regal, his expression calm yet commanding. She froze, unable to breathe. This was not the man from the tea stall, nor the one who laughed at the dripping tap in their small apartment. This was someone else, someone powerful, someone hidden. He extended his hand to her gently and whispered, "Do not be afraid. I am still your Ryan." She took his hand though her knees trembled, and together they walked inside. The grand lobby was filled with people in suits who stopped their work to greet him respectfully. Some called him Sir, others called him Chairman. She felt eyes on her full of curiosity and admiration. Her mind swirled. She wanted to ask 100 questions, but her lips refused to move. They entered an elevator and it rose silently to the top floor. When the doors opened, she found herself in a vast office with windows overlooking the entire city. On the desk lay documents, contracts, and reports. He walked to the window, stood tall, and finally turned to her. Alina, he began in a low, steady voice, I have kept something from you, not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I needed to know if someone could love me without knowing who I was. Her chest tightened as she listened. He continued, my name is Ryan Malik and I am the sole heir to one of the largest business empires in the country. For years I hid from the world that only saw me as a name and a fortune. I wanted to find a reason to live beyond money, beyond status. When I met you that night in your brokenness, you did not care who I was. You looked at me and spoke to me as if I were just a man. And when you chose me despite having nothing, I knew you were the truth I had been searching for. His voice cracked slightly as he said, those odd jobs, those nights by the tea stall were not lies but pieces of a life I created for myself to see the world without wealth. I hid because I was afraid of never finding love that was real. Tears welled in her eyes. Her world spun as memories flooded back, every simple moment they had shared, every laugh, every tear, every touch. He had been more than he seemed always. And she had loved him blindly. She whispered, why did you not tell me? He came to her, held her hands gently and said, because if I told you from the beginning you might have loved the money, not the man. But now I know without doubt you love me for me. She pressed her forehead against his chest, tears soaking his shirt. She whispered, I would choose you in any form, poor or rich, lost or found. He closed his arms tightly around her, and for the first time she felt the storm inside him ease. From that day her life changed in ways she could never have imagined. She was no longer the girl people pitied. She was the wife of a man the world admired and feared. Mansions, cars, wealth, and power surrounded her, yet she never forgot the small apartment, the rice and lentils, the laughter over broken furniture. She often reminded him of those days, and he would smile and say, those were the days I knew your love was pure. But wealth came with its own shadows. There were people who envied them, who whispered that she had tricked him, who doubted her worth. Yet each time such storms rose, he stood beside her and silenced the world with a single word. His loyalty was fierce, his protection unbreakable. Together they faced every challenge that came their way. Despite the luxury, she chose to live simply. She continued tutoring children even when people laughed at the idea. She told Ryan that she did not want to lose the woman she had been before all this. He admired her more for it. Sometimes he would leave behind meetings and wealth just to walk with her along the same streets where they first met. They would sit by the tea stall, though now the owner bowed deeply each time, and they would drink as though nothing had changed. Those moments reminded them that beneath the layers of power and titles they were still the two souls who had found each other in the ruins of heartbreak. Years passed and their love only deepened. She often thought back to the day her engagement was broken, the humiliation, the pain, and she realized that sometimes the greatest heartbreak is the door to the greatest blessing. If she had not been left at the altar, she would never have met the man who had become her everything. If she had not lost what she thought was love, she would not have found the truth. She once told Ryan, you were my destiny hidden in plain sight. He kissed her hand and replied, and you were my salvation. One evening as the sun set, they sat on the balcony of their home overlooking the city. He whispered, do you ever regret marrying a poor man who turned out to be a millionaire? She laughed softly with tears shining in her eyes and said, no, I married a man who turned out to be my soul. He smiled, kissed her gently, and in that moment both knew that their story was not about wealth or status, but about two hearts that had found each other against all odds. And so the woman whose engagement had been shattered built a new life with the man who had hidden his fortune not to deceive but to protect the purity of love. Their story spread quietly among those who knew them, whispered as a tale of how love can bloom in the ashes of heartbreak and how sometimes the poorest man is the richest soul waiting to be seen.